Thanks for tuning in to the Spread Your Wingspan podcast.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jenny.
And we're your hosts, two friends who immediately bonded over our secret smut addictions. So join us as we journey together through our favorite romance and fantasy stories and discuss all things kinks, female pleasure, taboos, and more.
Make sure to check out the show notes for any spoiler alerts and content warnings. We're happy you're here. Let's get to today's pod. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Jenny.
How are you?
I'm good.
That's good.
You are okay? You are injured?
I am okay. I am injured. Guys, I'm going to try to keep my Band-Aid hand out of your screen view today and not say ouch too much, but I'm very excited about today's topic.
I am as well, and I would love for you to introduce us to what we're doing today because it was originally your idea.
Yeah, so today, dear listeners, we're going to talk about our glossary of terms. We're going to start our glossary on our website and expand upon it because I think that what keeps happening to Sarah and I, at least, as we read different books and discover different books is we're learning these new terms and we're realizing that we don't know everything about all of the kinks.
Which makes sense.
And I think part of the fun in having these conversations is, what are these things? What are these things that I don't know? What are these things that other people are into and why are they into them?
Yes.
I think that's a central thing that we've been talking about. Like, I know for me, I just get so tickled, like talking about these scenes in books where I'm like, oh, tee, that was so dirty or so naughty. But like, why was it so dirty and so naughty? And why do I love it so much?
Yes. And why do we sometimes collectively love something versus some things are more fringe? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to dive in today.
Cool. So I just want to kind of lay the groundwork of what is going to go in our glossary. So kinks that we like, which we're pretty clear about what we like here. Things that we have learned along the way, reverse harem. And I think we talked about this on one of the last pods, like reading books for us is a good way for us to explore and figure out what our boundaries are in terms of relationships and sexual encounters. So that's going to kind of be the foundation of what we're doing today.
Yes, the through line.
The through line.
Yes.
Thank you. One of us is a writer. So, Sarah, can you please define for our listeners what a kink actually is?
A wide-ranging term for any unconventional sexual preference or behavior. But who defines convention?
I mean, we're not here to define convention.
Definitely not. We're just here to explore.
Yes. Yes. But I think that's a really interesting thing. Any unconventional sexual preference or behavior. And it makes me think about how history has really vilified people who fit outside the societal norms. And I do truly think that we live in a time, though we're not perfect and there's still a lot of work left to do, that the conversations about sexual preference, kinks, relationships, different types of relationships, having relationships with multiple people, like these are things that I feel very comfortable talking about now that I don't think I would have been comfortable talking about 20 years ago.
It's hard to say. I wish I could experience 20 years ago at the age I am now.
That's a good point.
As well, because like when I was a kid, I was super nervous and shy about all things sex. I think it was also a product of the time. So it's like, what was what. Also, we can't ignore the massive cultural influences here. Like from culture to culture, these change so much. One of my good friends is married to a French person. And there's been a lot of differences in her life intimately because of that. Because of the incredible difference, I won't say like with broad strokes across Europe, but at least in France, like especially youths have a very different experience of what's conventional with sex than we do in America. And that was fascinating to learn about a little bit, think about religion. Sierra Simone, we love you.
Yeah.
But the reason those books work is because they're built on the conventions of the Catholic Church and then she breaks them profoundly.
Yes.
Right? So without the conventions coming from that religion, there's no kink.
That's true. That's actually a really good point. Without these, I would say, fundamentalist, rigid ways of thinking, there would be no need to go outside of it.
Correct.
Fascinating. I have to think about that a little bit more.
I've literally never had that thought either until I said it out loud. So
I also the gift that keeps on giving.
She's so. We swear at this
We're
podcast.
swearing on this podcast.
Myself. She's so fucking smart. She is so fucking smart. And I hate people who claim that like smut and romance books are trashy and not intellectual. I'm like, read Priest.
Yes.
And get back to me.
Agreed.
But this isn't a Priest episode.
No, sorry. We already did that episode. So we're just checking out our show notes because we want to stay on topic.
We have a lot of notes today.
We do,
friends.
because we have learned a lot of terms.
Yes.
So I think that let's kind of start at the beginning of kind of, I think, where a lot of people could identify that they have a kink, a praise kink or a shaming kink. Mm-hmm. Okay, so praise kink. Girly
good
over here.
Girl. Yeah, that's me.
Call Sarah a good girl. She's gonna giggle just like that.
Yes, please.
So, which I also enjoy. I think they're fun to read. It's like the easiest way to be a little dirty. And maybe it's like the easiest way for dirty talk to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we could discover the nuances of this one kink and trope for an hour.
Probably.
Because I think so many of these are about gender dynamics in a traditional heteronormative binary way.
Yes.
Again, many kinks and taboos are about being outside of that. But especially with the praise kink and the shaming kink, I think so much of it is about either subversion or submission to that traditional power structure.
Yes. So again, talking about having to have that traditional power structure in place in order to figure out like, oh, if I step outside of it, why is that titillating? Why does that turn me on?
And you taught me about bottoming from the top, and I feel like that is a big part of praise kink.
Yes.
Because you're being demeaned and belittled, sort of, because it's patronizing.
Yes.
But at the same time, it then empowers you.
Yes. Yes. You're able to think about ways that you could use that submission to regain the power. Yeah.
Yes.
Bottoming from the top.
Bottoming from the top.
Power bottoms.
I love
Gotta love them. Gotta love them. But then talking about the shaming kink, which I actually think I'm more on this side of the wanting to be called demeaning names, wanting to be, told that they're, dirty little sluts or whore, or which, talk about the Madonna horror complex.
Yeah.
But
it's really ultimately, honestly, the same thing at the end of the day.
Yes.
It's just the total opposite side of the coin. Yeah. But it's the same freaking coin.
Because it's, I think, finding your safe space in order to play with these dynamics. So having safety in the relationship. And then also what turns you on. Being called a good girl. So, I mean, yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. Pat me on the head. I'm a good girl. Like, okay, sometimes, but more often than not, no. Pull my hair and tell me I'm a dirty little whore.
Oh, see, but you can get your hair pulled and then you told you were a good girl because your hair you tolerated the hair pulling very nicely.
It's true. Yeah. But I'm just saying, for me, I really do think it's the other one.
It's the other one.
It's the other one.
Fascinating. Yeah. That's so interesting.
And maybe because I was raised Catholic, I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe.
Honestly, because, Poppy and Tyler, that's definitely their vibe.
That is their vibe.
Yeah. Although he calls her Little Lamb, which is almost praise kink.
Yeah. Part of his flock. Where he's in control of his flock. He's the shepherd. He's guiding her and allowing her to find her way within his confines and his bounds.
It's good stuff.
Okay, Sarah, no more priest.
I know.
No more priest.
The thing is, she just has so many kinks in her book, but books, plural. And also, we have not yet gone into too much other kind of like 5 pepper spice smut yet on this podcast. So I think what we've talked about previously is mostly just her milieu versus what we will be talking about in the future is going to be much broader.
Yes.
Yes. So I would say the idea for this glossary came about because we were doing the Stuff Your E-Reader. And I was furiously texting you because the romance books they have them categorized by tropes and kinks. And I had gotten to one and it said reverse harem. And I was like, Jenny, what is a reverse harem? And I would like to go there, please.
we're gonna have to overlay like the mini text exchange on this. I think it was all caps. Reverse harem. What is this? And then I just started laughing because I think I'd already put 3 reverse harem books in my Kindle, and I was like, I think you should just pick one and go for it, and you did.
It happened to be with brothers.
Which I still haven't read that one.
And I texted her and I was like, weirdly, this works.
I believe you.
She somehow pulled it off. It's a not very good book, and yet it's good.
Yeah.
We love that about romance.
Yes. The one that I did read also was not a very good book, but the sex was really, the writing and the plot developed, like this was pure porn. I am down for the pure porn. Like that's fine. Mm-hmm. So far, I have not read a reverse harem book that is
not pure porn.
Yeah, or had a fully developed character. Stable.
I think because when there's so many characters and they all need to fuck each other, you don't have time for character development.
I would like to bring up Crescent City 3. They could have all been fucking and I would have been happy.
Could have. But that book was already far too long and terrible. So if she had done House of Many Waters first...
maybe.
Although we would have had to have so much Therian and fuck that guy.
Or Jeff.
So what is a reverse harem, friends? It is generally one woman and multiple men. It could be one woman and then multiple male and female partners as well. But I would say traditionally what I've experienced is that it's a woman with like 3 or 4 or 5 men.
Yes. And when talking about the books that, I look back to what my grandmother used to read and how, this is going to sound so bad, but like it was usually a white woman who was captured by an Ottoman sultan and then like brought into his harem. And so a lot of the books that I first read that had any sort of sex scenes in them was this harem, like one sultan, which is, a white woman stolen from her family. And anyway, very problematic, but also kind of hot. So then
it's a convention. So there's therefore a kink, right?
Also very racist.
Yeah.
Stereotyping, like this is like
totally.
The infidel. Anyway, so there was a lot of stuff in those books that, man, is so cringy now. But yeah, never in those books was there a queen. There was no Cleopatra in any of these books.
I mean, it's so clear to me why this appeals to me. Like, there's this, obviously, female reader. I identify as female then. Like, you identify with a female character, and it's total empowerment from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Like, and there's so much praising, and there's so much devotion, and there's worship. Even when there's drama, there's worship. It's like there's this singular focus that I think is, of course, this female fantasy.
True. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Even the dirty little sluts would enjoy this.
Agreed. Because so if I think about polyamory, where I think there's more equity in these relationships than we're talking about in a reverse harem.
Yeah.
But I think that the appeal to being able to interact and have loving relationships with multiple people, let's just distill it down and make it really basic and just strip it down to the sex.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Who wouldn't want multiple people to worship them, be devoted to them, and in a sexual fashion, give them their all?
And for so many people who were raised with, again, this culture of monogamy, that inherently would be a taboo.
Yes.
And yet what these reverse harems do is show this is actually quite simple. And it's not complicated. Like, it's easy to engage in a multi-pronged relationship.
You said prong.
Prong.
We should prong to our glossary.
It's really multi-pronged in a reverse harem. Where it's nobody's heartbroken. No, like it's so I think that shows you that even at least in the sexual way, again, like, yes, this is the sexual version of what this looks like.
Yes. Are
you ready to explore what that means emotionally, relationally, in a more deeper way? Then you might want to explore, books with polyamory.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So the porn entree into polyamory, reverse harems.
For, I think, maybe specifically straight women, but not necessarily.
True.
I would say if you've never explored it and you're listening and you're like, okay, get to it, friends.
Figure out how to be alerted for the Kindle Stuff Your E-Reader Day, because that's when we get a lot.
Yeah,
of our
and
stories.
again, be warned. You might be reading some writing that you're like,
Yeah. So you can bookmark the scenes that you like for when you go back.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of multiples, Throuples. Now, I have to mention challengers when I'm talking about this.
Did you see it? Oh no, I saw it.
You saw it as well?
I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could not have been more disappointed.
What? Oh, I loved it.
I loved it.
Okay.
But I was sold that this was a throuple movie.
Oh.
Based on a few podcasts I had listened to. And we leave, and Tyler, my husband, immediately turns to me and goes, "You didn't think there was enough sex, right?" And I was like, "No!" I was like, "They're supposed to be having sex with each other the whole time, Tyler." And he was laughing at me. But so, okay, I feel like a lot of people have been like talking up that this is throuples, and I'm like, that's not really
at all
a throuple.
No.
Maybe they become more of a throuple, but there's no consenting to the throuple, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
A throuple has to be something that's agreed upon.
Yeah, with many rules and other things.
Yes, this is more like just a messy-ass love triangle.
Yeah.
Yes. So, what is a throuple then?
Okay, so for me, in my definition, a throuple is 3 people who are in a relationship with equity to all 3.
Mm-hmm.
So might be 3 men, 3 women, a combination, 2 men, 1 woman, any combination within the 3. Yeah. But to me, a true throuple has equity.
Yes.
So this isn't an open relationship. This isn't, it is a type of polyamory where, polyamory, I guess we should define, is when you believe that you can have committed, loving relationships with multiple people at once.
Correct.
So, yeah. Did I define what I believe?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it doesn't necessarily need to be equitable sexually. Mm. It can just be equitable relationally.
Yes.
I think it often is also equitable sexually, but not necessarily.
Yeah.
Juliana Spar is an amazing writer and poet, and she wrote a memoir, a kind of poetic memoir, about her experience being in a throuple. I cannot remember the title, but you should search her name and memoir and you will find it. It is incredible. And that really opened my horizons when I was in college. I read it for a class. And she addresses yous the whole time, which is just very beautiful. And I feel like it gives you a good idea of what it is like to be in a triangle that is a safe and loving triangle and not a fraught love triangle.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for people who identify as bisexual or pansexual or anything out of the heteronormative monogamous coupling, I think to me that's a beautiful expression of if you, how do I want to say this? Like, I think we all make choices on who we want to commit to in whatever way we want to. The people that I have known that have been in throuples, both to some degree of success and not success, I think always entered it from a place of, I want to live my fullest expression in who I am now, in how I want to live my life now. And it's a really, I think just a really lovely way to find that.
Yeah. Lindy West, also another writer, is in a throuple. And she and her husband were not originally a throuple. And then they brought in a third person. And she's talked extensively about this because it was her husband's, originally it was an open marriage. Mm-hmm. That was a step they took for their marriage, for the health of their marriage. And her husband had a relationship with this other woman. And that was a step they took. I don't want to speak for or misspeak from what I've gotten from what she said, is because she was having a lot of codependency and anxiety in their relationship. And it was like, for the health of our relationship, we need to get another piece of stability, like another leg for this table. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then through him being with her, Lindy and this woman then developed their own relationship. And they became a throuple, and it's working very well for them. And her anxiety is better, and it's a healthier relationship dynamic. So again, I feel like the more that people are kind of openly discussing these, again, non-heteronormative, non-monogamous relationship structures, and how for some people, that might be the healthiest way to love. Mm-hmm. And I really, really appreciate that. And again, I feel like books kind of give you a way, if that you've never seen or heard of this, mm-hmm. and you're maybe from like a pretty like cloistered or sheltered existence, and you're reading a book, and it's like, oh, but okay. that's interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then you know more about what might make you happy.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
And I think also will help you better identify how to speak up for your needs, whatever they are. If that's the thing that you need, great. But also, if you hear of something that is like, I'm expanding my horizons, I'm learning new ways of being in the world, I'm learning of new possibilities in relationships. And if I now have the language, then it's going to, I hope, make it easier for some people to dip their toes in and be able to express their needs and their wants.
With consent.
With consent. Consent.
That's because of what you're saying is like, if you're well-informed, your partner can be well-informed because you can communicate with them.
Yes.
Is it always perfect? No.
No.
Do we often explore and fumble and learn things together in practice with our partners? Yes. But I think part of what's so awesome about the romance book genre is it's like this secret code, especially for girls and women, obviously not exclusively, where it's like, hey, like, we traditionally are not allowed to talk about this out loud. Mm-hmm. Read this book.
Yes. Yeah. Or here, I'm going to pass you this book because I think it might help you.
Yeah, like, oh, you like being called a good girl? Me?
Okay.
You should explore that more.
Yeah. And I do want to say, a throuple is different from a threesome.
Absolutely.
A threesome is straight up, we're going to have some sex, have some fun. 3 people. 3 is not a crowd.
Oh, no.
But a throuple, I do put in the relationship bucket. I
really want to mention a book series that you have yet to read that we are going to read for this podcast.
My list is like this.
But this is a book talk popular. Like, I want us to talk about this.
Okay.
And I want to talk about an element of these books right now, but I do not want to spoil anything for you.
Do not spoil it for me.
The restraint, you guys, that I'm having to wrestle up inside myself.
Okay, well, what's the name of the book? So in case anybody else has listened to it, they can know your restraint.
I don't even want to say that because it's immediately going to put things together.
All right, we'll put a pin in it.
I will mention this again when we get to these books. Okay. Moving on.
Yes.
Daddy kink.
Daddy, zaddy. I like saying zaddy more because for me, daddy, like I will say like, oh, he's such a daddy. But me, I can't call him a daddy.
I would never call my husband daddy either, but I have gotten progressively more okay and interested in it, which is fast. Not again in my personal sex life, but in like what I'm reading or like what I find interesting.
Yeah.
See, in Sinner, there's a small daddy scene, and I'm like, there's also a book that I read, I think called Yes, Daddy. And the content warning is like, you know what this book is about to be about. If you have a problem with this, don't read it.
Very good.
I love her books. I won't. I'll try to find the answer later. And that one is like a real daddy kink where like there's, pretending that this girl who is young is even younger and like is a daughter kind of. And there's like caretaking and rules and like I make your lunch for you and we have sex. And it does transition out of that eventually.
Interesting.
But it remains yes, daddy in bed. Again, fascinating. I think this is a more taboo, more kinkified version of the praise kink.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Yes.
It comes up in like literal non-book porn in like rougher sex. I find, this like overpowering of the bottom, whether that's a female person, whoever. And then, acknowledgement of the powering position as the daddy. I think it's really interesting.
I do too. It's not one that I'm super into. Like, I wouldn't seek out a book called Yes, Daddy personally.
Yeah.
I do not mind when it's sprinkled in a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think that where I will just kind of refer to people as a daddy is when I see hot guys on Instagram. And I think even
we Instagram
like, oh, hey, daddy. I love the word zaddy. Which I think zaddy is just like an even hotter daddy type.
Yes.
So yes. That's the way I feel comfortable.
Well,
saying that.
Yeah, I mean, like I literally called my dad daddy growing up. So like for me, and like the word daddy is like But again, like because it's taking on this cultural, it almost is like a homonym to me.
Yeah.
Now of father daddy.
Yeah.
And I'm again like interested. I'm interested how with time it's moving for me away from something that's ick to me, for something that's again not necessarily like I read that book because I was really freaking curious.
Yeah.
And not as much because I was like, oh yeah,
this is what I'm looking for.
And frequently, that's been happening to me. A lot of these kinks are, I'll mention books that I read where I was like, that's interesting to me, and not necessarily I was like, oh baby, you know. So Daddy Kink. Then we're getting into
a little
more classic
categories. Yes. Yeah. So I think we should start with this because when Sara and I were, collectively working on our document for our glossary, we're like, well, if we're going to talk about a glossary, let's like create the thing and figure out what we want to talk about. And I think we had kind of both said BDSM, bondage, and then Dom sub. And then I was like, well, we should probably define what BDSM is because I find that that's more of an umbrella term with, different things sprinkled underneath.
Yeah.
Not like a hard and fast rule, but, so I found, so the app Field, which I have been married for too long to really know too much about these modern apps. But I know a lot of friends who use Field. And when I searched for like definition of BDSM, it was the field.co glossary of genders, identities, and desires. And I thought this was really cool because they, as a dating app, were trying to offer a central place for people to be able to use words talking about, consent and respect and everything. Like, hey, know what some of these terms are that people are going to be putting on their dating profiles.
I love this.
So that was so great.
I love this.
So this is how they define BDSM. It's a term that includes a wide range of erotic practices, generally relating to control and or pain. Activities can be broken down into categories of bondage and discipline, domination and submission, and sadism and masochism. So let me just say bondage and discipline. So that's definitely control, sometimes pain.
Yep.
Depending on the type of bondage. Domination and submission. I mean, that could be as vanilla as Poppy and Tyler.
Mm-hmm. We get a soft dom.
A soft dom.
Sub-categorization there.
And then sadism and masochism is straight up pain.
Mm-hmm.
Sadists enjoy inflicting pain. Masochists enjoy receiving pain.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, again, so it's hard. Hopefully as content warnings evolve, like a book will say soft dom, for example, or intense. Right now, I think a lot of it just says BDSM or domination submission. And so you might not know the temperature or severity of the BDSM you're about to encounter. And for me, sometimes it definitely is a bit too much. Where I know the characters are consenting, enjoying themselves. This is what they want. But for me, I'm like, ow. Or
I'm now taken out of the moment because
I'm taken out of the moment. And I'm curious, I'm interested, I like learning about things. The Nashville Neighborhood series, which I would also love for us to explore on this podcast, is each book is a taboo. And then I think it's the fourth or fifth book is about a BDSM throuple, actually. And that one, along with, again, the Lioness series, Sierra Simone again, which I've mentioned, even the new Camelot series has scenes of BDSM where it's for me a pretty intense version. But it also, to me, again, I have no real world experience with this, but it seems as though it is more like what people who go seek out BDSM, especially at sex clubs, for example, do want an encounter. It seems like it's actually pretty normal standard along that viewpoint of it.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't have any real world experience. So this is just us reading and learning and putting, our brains together to try to, see. Yeah, I have read books. I was trying to think. I think I just, Kushiel's Dart, I think, is the first book of the series. And there's 3 sets of trilogies. And the first trilogy is about this woman, her name is Phaedra, who is a courtesan, but she derives pleasure from pain. Not in a like kinky way, like she like biologically
like literally
has this gift from the gods that is what she does. And so she ends up being trained as like a highly trained courtesan. And then later when she's older, encounters these people in like power, I don't know if they're kings because I read it a while ago, but it's really good. But anyway, the the encounters of this, because that is her specific gift, does go into a lot of what I wouldn't normally seek out as content in books, but I think that it was written in such a beautiful way to explore why some people might like this.
Yeah.
And so I came out of that trilogy just like really delighted. Like, wow, I didn't think. Was it the most turned on I've ever been from a book? No. Was it titillating? Absolutely. Was the story well written? Yes.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend this. I can add this to the show notes. The exact name of the author and trilogy. But anyway, I think that has been the only true series where I've encountered this and I was like, oh yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So I definitely, in domination and submission, I'm much more interested, especially like in like maybe the softer shades of that. And then read the Storm Queen series, which I told you to read.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first like book shares we did.
Yes.
By Rochelle Mead. And there is bondage. And that's the first time I had read of bondage with like, I do not know the proper term for this, but you know, like the intricate rope knotting version. Shibari, yes. And I was like, oh. Oh. I was so surprised how interested I was in that. And I had read of other series where there was bondage before, but it was a specific, very ritualistic, very artistic, meditative version of bondage. It's a very specific version of bondage. Yes. And it's used in a specific way in this one specific relationship in the series. And yeah, so, you know, you just never know, friends.
Yeah. Also, I am also incredibly interested in rope bondage. And I think it's called Shibari, which is the Japanese rope bondage. And have considered taking workshops here. So there's a pretty thriving.
There is.
You know,
I've seen it at like markets.
Yeah.
And it does not need to be sexual, you guys.
Or done in the nude either.
Correct. No, I frequently have seen it like a demonstration. Yes. One person is bonding another in this way. Is that the right term? Bonding? Binding?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
And it certainly is, I think, a pleasurable act, but it doesn't necessarily need to have the sexual intimacy involved. Yeah.
Yeah. So, have you ever read The Persimmon Tree?
No.
By Bryce Courtenay?
Does it include?
It's not a romance. It's a novel. It's an exquisite novel. It's one of my favorites. I reread it again, I think last year, but there is a storyline, you know, a little plot line in there about a man who likes to be tied up. And I won't give any more away because it is a really beautiful novel.
Yeah.
Not a romance novel by far, even though there is, you know, a love story. There's a relationship story.
Okay.
And there's love stories. But anyway, yeah, that was the first time I think I ever heard about this. And then living in the Bay Area, I think you're just kind of exposed to all sorts of wonderful, weird, wild people who are into these wonderful, weird, wild things.
Yeah.
And so I know that there's a studio here in Oakland where you can go learn it. And, you know, again, just never would I have thought in my youth that I would be interested in something like this. But being exposed to it and having people that have experienced it, both as a bonder, tie-upper.
We don't know the correct terms.
But you know, for her being bound and also doing the tying, I think is fascinating because usually when we're reading about these relationships in books, one is very clearly the dom and the other is very clearly the sub.
Yes.
Not often do they switch.
Sometimes there are switch characters.
Sometimes, but I would say overwhelmingly the scenes that I've read, there's one who's like, I am this type of person, correct, and the other one is, I am this type of person.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Which I think, I don't know, I can't speak for, if you're out there and you feel comfortable emailing us and you're part of this community, we would love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this. If you want to correct us in anything or just share, hey, this is my like real world experience with this. We would be honored if you would share that with us. We would keep it anonymous. We would not even necessarily share it on the podcast. It would just be for our own edification. Please feel free to email us. hello@spreadyourwingspan.com.
Yeah, we definitely want to get this right. And also thank you for saying that. If ever we are in need of correction, we're doing our best. We try to be as thoughtful as possible. And, but if you ever think that we're doing that not as gracefully as we could, please tell us. Because we don't want to be misspeaking or misrepresenting or anything. We are two people representing ourselves, learning about other people.
And we are, elder millennial white women. So we are inherently limited,
That's true.
And we are interested in self-improvement.
That's true.
Let's get to relating to our origin story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. I love this. Like, we get off on tangents and I'm like, bring it back. What are we talking about? So, I'm just going to read what I have written here. Fairy porn, how Jennie outed Sara. So, brief backstory. Sara and I had developed our smutty little friendship.
Yes.
For a few months, at this point. And then we were with a mutual client of ours whom I am very close with. And,
yes.
And very,
you have a very
irreverent, fun, we have a lovely relationship, but we do talk about.
I had just met this person in a professional context.
And I outed Sara and said that she read fairy porn. And then I immediately realized my mistake because
this was my face.
Sara started blushing and was like, Sarah's very collected, very professional, very well-spoken. And I flummoxed her. And then I went, oh, boundaries, Jennie, boundaries. And then I felt really, really bad because I realized that, one, maybe she didn't want that to be known.
It was not something I was widely sharing in my life yet. Yes.
Well, cat's out of the bag now. But two, I also realized, like, just because I have a close, irreverent relationship with somebody, even though we work in a professional capacity, I overstepped a boundary. And then I felt really, really bad after. Two, I was humbled and realized I had made a mistake. And I was like, Sara, I'm really sorry.
We got past it, obviously.
Obviously we got past it.
And also, like, even if she hadn't apologized, like, I adore her, and, like, I'm like, this is the way that they talk to each other, okay. But I was like, how do I backtrack? How do I, like, moonwalk out of this situation? Again, because, like, I think as I said in our intro podcast, like, I was reading fan fiction a little bit in high school, and, like, my best friend about that, and I was buying secret grocery store romance books, and it was, like, maybe Sara and one other trusted confidant experience. Like, it was not something I shared with people. And so honestly, even in my adult life, like, you were one of the first people I, like, openly was like, hey, like, openly chatting about this with. So then to suddenly have the door burst open with, like, somebody who was basically a stranger to me, I was like, okay. Well, I'm in my mid-30s, I was like, I can handle it, but okay. Fairy porn. What is it?
Why do we love centuries-old men seducing teenagers? Question mark. LOL.
I think I wrote it.
But it's true, like, age gap, which I think is our next one, so maybe these will bleed into each other. But, what is it about immortality, somebody being usually incredibly wealthy because they've been living for hundreds of years, in a position of power because they come from this pure bloodline where they inherit magic and all these things. Why is that so freaking awesome? I love it. I cannot get enough of it.
And, like, I'll read an age gap or, like, a real life age gap romance, like in the celebrity media or whatever, where it's like a 60-year-old guy with a 21-year-old, and I'm like, ugh. And then I'm reading a book and it's like 513 to 19. And I'm like, yes.
Is it because it doesn't actually happen? Is it because it's so implausible that we can kind of get out of the ick?
They never act 513. That's where I come from. Interview with the Vampire, those fuckers are weird as hell.
They are.
After living for so long.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, this is weird. You won't like this. Sex is happening. Is anybody enjoying it? I don't know. I'm Anne Rice. Like, it's sexy and it's bloody, but also you're like, everyone is so weird. Like, and then you get to Sarah J. Maas and it's like, Rhysand is acting 30 years old.
But he has all of the domination, power, and control and wealth.
That 513 or whatever, I don't know if that's exactly.
Well,
I feel like that, years would afford him. But, like, you would be so weird after living for that long. Like, you would not. I think so. I think you wouldn't be able to relate to someone who'd only lived 19 years. I don't think so.
But I feel like he lived in such darkness for so long.
He's just one. But this.
No. I'm justifying it in my head.
All of them, I feel like, act like they stopped aging at a very hot mid-20s. Physically and in every other way, and then they've just kind of, like, frozen through time. They've been alive, but they haven't been changing.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of immortality.
So you think the age actually doesn't matter? It's that they've grown up very slowly?
Yes, well, like, I have beef with Azrael. Because I'm like, you've been alive for over 500 years and you still have childhood issues? I'm sorry.
Well, sometimes they're very deeply rooted and traumatic.
Yeah, but you've had time to go to therapy.
Yeah, but not everybody goes to therapy.
Okay, but they've had time to work through.
There's no therapy in
if it's anywhere in Prithian,
thank you.
in Valaris. Okay.
Fair.
I just think...
Do you know how much sex you could have in 500 years?
Plenty. I even think you just inherently would work through some stuff, or you become an absolute villain. Like, I just don't see how you would end up being this emo fuckboy after 500 years.
Emo bat boys.
Can't wait till you prove me wrong, Sarah. I'm going to happily switch my position, I'm sure, on this, or I'll dig my heels in. Time will tell.
True.
But yeah, so I enjoy this. I'm devil's advocating a little bit here because I'm like, why does it work? I think it works because it kind of doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely in the fantasy realm. And so in the fantasy realm, we can believe that anything happens. We don't need to think about it too deeply.
Yes, and it doesn't need to no one on Earth would have any idea what it would be like to live for multiple hundreds of years, right? So it's all a thought experiment. But I think some people take that thought experiment, again, a bit more seriously. Even Stephanie Meyer, Edward's a fucking weirdo.
Yeah.
He's like a 119-year-old virgin, first of all, which is, buddy. And he's like, I would have courted you. We wouldn't have even kissed. I would have taken you for lemonade. And his values haven't aged with him in an interesting way. He does kind of seem like 100 years old.
That's true.
And it's like,
but an infantilized 100 years old.
Yeah, because he's a virgin. It's just, and I think a lot of people read those books and they're like, what, this guy's...
Yeah, I just didn't like them. I mean, I read them.
I did as a child. It worked for me as a child because I didn't know better.
Yeah. So, Sarah, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Looking at our outline, I'm wondering, do we want to part 2 the rest of this? Because I don't want to rush all the juicy things.
Should we finish our discussion of age gap?
Yes, I think that would be good.
Yeah.
Guys, apparently we're going to have a really big glossary.
We knew this.
This is true. We did. Okay, so age gap.
So we've talked about fantastical fairy or just magical. Fairy as a blanket term for magical fantasy age gap. Then there's also just regular ass old age gap.
Like Sinner.
Correct. Like Sinner, but I have read a lot of books in this. And again, IRL, not into this. In books, I'm into it. And I'm very interested in how I can hold those two things in my brain at once.
IRL, into it. Books, into it.
I love that.
Very into an age gap.
I love that.
Trending older, not younger. I cringe thinking about now as a 40-year-old woman. Cringe. I
have in my notes, older man versus older woman, how we react to a simple variation in trope as a culture, as individuals. It is fucking fascinating that one of them works for you and the other one is like, meh.
Well, is it because I have always enjoyed relationships with older men? And my husband's 8 years older than me. It's not like I'm breaking any molds here, but other relationships have definitely been older before.
Yeah.
My husband.
I don't know. I mean, for me too, so again, the Nashville Neighborhood series, which we're going to read, The Doctor's the first one, and it's a man in his 40s and a 19-year-old girl. Really works for me.
Oh, God. I don't know.
It works.
But, yes, okay.
It works. She's exploring taboos in each book.
No, it does.
It also is her ex-boyfriend's dad.
Okay, that's hot. But
it's so hot.
But it's just funny to me, thinking I took myself out of what you were saying for a second and thinking me, 40-year-old with a 19-year-old.
So the second book is a woman in her 40s and a guy in his early 20s. And I was not the book, I was like, yeah, that's good, that's fine. But the Doctor, I was like, ho.
Yeah. Unless they were a Formula One driver. And I'm very into it. Those boys are so young and so hot.
Yeah, and I'm like, is this my internalized, ageist misogyny of older women are bleh? Because in this, this is immature, and it uses the same convention of how it works for the male girl versus the woman boy. the younger character is mature for their age or what have you. Like, it's not, he's a worthy partner.
Yeah.
And I still was like,
see, I'm not coming at it from that way. I'm thinking like, oh my God, they're so inexperienced when they're young. Why would I want to go back to like the fumbling, whatever? And also, I don't want to teach anybody.
but that's what I'm saying. In these books, there's no teaching to be done. In fact, frequently the old woman is still being taught something. She's being like liberated or like having a sexual reawakening, etc.
Okay.
By this young stud.
I'll have to read these. Because to me, I'm just immediately like, no, you're a child. You're a child. No.
Yeah.
But,
okay. Like, again, like, you take care of me.
All right. Maybe I need to expand my horizons on this a little bit.
I would say in The Doctor, I think it is like the most extreme, like, like, he's 19 and he's a doctor in his 40s. Yeah. Like, that's a big gap.
Yeah.
And again, it works magnificently. I think that's Nikki Crap. She really should have, like, prepared with, like, authors.
It's okay. I also, my memory decides to stop working sometimes. So, well, what
if you Google the Nashville neighborhood, The Doctor, you're going to find the correct book. So, again, I think this is just so interesting to think about what is the convention here, what is being broken, and why is it appealing to us?
Way to bring it back, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, do we think that all kinks have to be a convention broken, or can some kinks just be pleasurable for the sake of what it is?
That is a fascinating question. I feel like it's got to be both, but I don't know if we could ever separate the conventions that underpin our society, even if we don't like personally subscribe to them.
It's true.
So, because then, like, culturally, then the kink exists, right? So it's like a collective thing that we're partaking in individually. So you can have an individual experience, but can you separate the collective out of it? I don't know.
Probably not. I think we're conditioned so much from a young age by who we're surrounded by, the stuff that we see in the media, the things that, kids, the misinformation that kids like to spread.
Yeah.
No, maybe you can't ever fully separate it. I mean, eventually, I think you can.
Yeah, I mean, they evolve as well. And then things that were unconventional become conventional with time, too. And then that might become its own thing that then a counter-conventional kink is born from. Who knows?
Counter-conventional kinks. Ooh. I love it.
We didn't yet talk about, we should wrap up, but we haven't talked about the whole, like, why we named our podcast Spread Your Wingspan.
Oh, I think we should, this is a good time to put the story in.
So, we were texting again furiously, as we are wont to do, about the name of our podcast. And as, a poet and writer, I was sending hundreds of suggestions to Jennie.
Hey, some
I was throwing pasta on the wall. And
no bad ideas in a brainstorm. No bad ideas in a brainstorm. But some of them, oh man, we'll have to look back at that too. Rejected names for Spread Your Wingspan.
I was just trying to make Jennie laugh.
She succeeded.
Or scandalizing Griff, who I knew was on the other end with you.
Yes.
Hearing what was being said.
Yes.
And we landed on Spread Your Wingspan. Mostly because, again, like our ACOTAR friendship beginnings.
Yes.
Wingspans is a thing in that book.
Yes.
Like with dick size and like it's nice and like lewd, but obviously it references the romantasy element.
Yes, but it's like very
right. And then we don't want to spread your wings because that's could be a podcast about like literally anything, bird watching perhaps.
Angels.
Exactly. It also is like conventional in a way we're not interested in.
Exactly.
So we spread your wingspan, and then as I was thinking about it, I was like, it's also kind of like spread your horizons.
Yes. Well, I think first it was spreading your legs.
Spreading your legs.
Like spreading your wings.
It was.
Very, very, the hot face spread their wings, and then the lady spreads their legs. So we were giggling about that, but then very poignantly, Sarah was like, oh, but it's also like, expand your horizons. How can we expand our horizons? And maybe offer a little touch point for you guys to also maybe learn about things or discover new books. I mean, hey, at its basic premise, we just want to read all the books. So we just want to read the books.
Yes.
Yeah. So Spread Your Wingspan. That's how she was named.
Yeah. Here we are. And here you are, dear listeners. Again, if you have any comments or questions about today's episode, please contact us either on Instagram or email.
Yes.
We will resume part 2.
Yes, we knew this was going to be a very weighty one. So we will resume part 2. We're only halfway through our outline.
And we got some interesting things coming.
I agree.
Looking at it in the outline.
Including one that I still have no idea what it is. I've been waiting. I haven't even looked it up. I won't say what it is. We'll just explore that together in the next episode.
It's going to become our Instagram clip, I guarantee.
Probably.
Although we might get shadow banned for it.
Oh, man. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Spread Your Wingspan podcast.
We would love to hear what you think about our topics today. Be sure to connect with us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You can find us on both with the handle @SpreadYourWingspan, and all of the links and more fun stuff are found on our website, spreadyourwingspan.com.
And if you have a book or author you want us to check out, send us an email at hello@spreadyourwingspan.com to tell us.
We hope you tune into the next episode.